Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be looking at this Apricot Xi computer from 1984. So this is going to be a vintage computer related video. And recently I've been doing a lot of vintage TV stuff, but I will continue to do that. But vintage computers are another big hobby of mine. So I wanted to talk about the Apricot Xi and all the hardware and spare parts and documentation I have for it. Because I've got a decent amount of stuff for this thing. And I've also got a decent amount of other Apricot computers, which I will make videos on. In fact, let's take a quick look. So I've got some Apricot Qis there, which are quite hard to find. Some Mitsubishi Apricots, and I've also got an Apricot Zen, the original Apricot Zen with the external power supply. So this is the Apricot Xi, which came out in 1984. And there was a predecessor to this, the Apricot PC, which was pretty much the same, except it had a beige sort of white color to it rather than black. But I think this looks a lot cooler with the black. And the other difference is that the Apricot PC before this had 2 floppy drives. This just has 1 floppy drive and a 10 megabyte hard disk. And I believe you could also get this in a 5 megabyte hard disk configuration instead, which I haven't seen that configuration before. I think the 10 megabyte config was a lot more popular, but yes, this one's a 10 megabyte MFM hard drive inside there. And you might be able to see, I'm not sure, but there is no floppy drive in there, and that's because it doesn't work, unfortunately. So I've taken that out. I'll talk a little bit about why it's not working later. And also, this computer is not IBM compatible, so it's its own thing. It's Apricot compatible, so it won't run any IBM software. There is an IBM emulator for this, which only runs in text mode, so no graphics. But it doesn't really work that well, so as you can imagine. So we'll talk about that later. But yeah, this is basically Apricot compatible. It has an Intel 8089 CPU for the I/O, and it also has its own expansion bus with its own expansion cards. It doesn't have ISA. Of course, it's got its own BIOS, the Apricot BIOS, and it does run MS-DOS and CP/M, and it also has an 8086 CPU as well. So here's the keyboard, quite a cool looking keyboard. It does have a different layout to your typical IBM keyboard, and it's also missing the function keys. But instead we have this micro screen. So this micro screen is basically like a calculator by default. It also displays the date and time because we do have a slot here for a 9-volt battery, which would be for the real-time clock, which is kind of cool. But yes, by default, it's pretty much a calculator, so you can do your calculator stuff on the numpad and you can send the outcome to the screen. But also in some applications, you can actually have different functions on here. So I think GW Basic lets you print, save, load, list, all that stuff using these keys here. Also on the keyboard, we've got a reset switch and we've got a contrast wheel for the micro screen. The last thing on the keyboard to note of is this here, which is a, I don't even know what sort of connector that is, but it's for the Apricot mouse, which unfortunately is very rare. It's quite hard to find. And it's a trackball mouse. But of course, you can use the system without a mouse. However, I've done a bit of research, and apparently some people have managed to get this to work with a serial mouse, so I might have to try that later. But anyway, I'm going to turn this system around. We'll take a look at the back. Okay, before we take a look at the back, I just want to mention this. This is the monitor, of course. This is a green screen monochrome monitor. And I believe this one is a 12-inch screen. You could also get a 9-inch monitor, which I think was quite common, the 9-inch version. I do have one of those. I'll show you that later. But anyway, let's turn this around. Okay, so this is the back of the monitor. Up here we've got the contrast control, and we've got just one cable coming from the monitor, and that's because the power for the monitor is actually coming from the PC itself, which is kind of cool. So we have 12 volts going into this, and of course the video as well. And then on the back, I need to clean this a little bit better, but we've got the IEC kettle lead input. We've got a, that's the monitor output. We've got an RS-232 25-pin DB connector, which is female, which usually the male, but I have seen some PCs using this female connector rather than a male. We've got the Centronics printer connector, and we've got the keyboard connector. Another thing I want to mention is that the keyboard connector here does have this little bit of plastic, and that's because usually, we put this here, usually you'd have the cable wrapped around like this, and it just helps it from not getting dislodged or bending too much. So that's what that's for. Also, another thing to note is that the monitor cable, the monitor connector, has this sort of outside bit of plastic here, and that's to clip the cable in there. So if I push this in, you can hear it click, and it stops it from coming out. So it's sort of like a mini lock, but you can just press the sides in, and then it releases it. Okay, so before we take a look inside, I quickly want to show you this brochure I've got, which is pretty cool, and it shows you all about the Apricot PC. Okay, so we've also got this brochure here, and this is pretty cool. This is a pretty cool brochure. It's in very nice condition, and I think this would have come out in 1983. I say that because it features the original Apricot PC, the white sort of beige colored one. And as you can see, there's a lot of ACT logos here. And also, sorry about the glare on the camera, but yeah, there's a lot of ACT logos here, and that's because ACT is the company that made the Apricot. Eventually, I think in around 1985, they changed their name. So anyway, we got the Apricot PC, the original one there. So if we open up on the first page here, 4th generation personal computers, and we've got lots of info about the Apricot PC. It's also showing the 3.5-inch micro floppy disk, which, of course, at the time in 1984 was quite new still. And as you can see, the Apricot PC, the original one, had 2 floppy drives rather than 1 floppy drive and a hard disk. We also have this mouse here, which I've never seen before, so I don't know if it's very rare or whether this was just a promotional thing, but interesting to see. I assume they were selling the Apricot PC before they released this brochure, so maybe it does exist, I don't know. And as you can see, that's the micro screen in action. We've got the date and time, might be quite hard to see with the glare. And then there's the Apricot keyboard, and it talks a bit about it. Now, this is probably one of the coolest pages. This is a page just showing off the motherboard. And it's a full-sized image. This is the actual size of the motherboard, which is nice. And yeah, it talks about the motherboard. As you can see, there are the expansion slots I talked about, which are not ISA. We got the BIOS chips there. And it's funny enough, actually, these BIOS chips, as you can see, they don't have labels on, and they're also in green sockets, which is not what the retail units have. So obviously this is some sort of development board, or a very early board at least. We've got the Intel 8089 there, which, as it says, is the input-output processor. It says it up here. And yeah, these machines have the Intel 8086 CPU. I believe you could put a NEC V30 in here, but you have to do like a BIOS update, I believe. I'm not sure, but you can't just drop it in. So But other than that, the board, from my understanding, doesn't really have any custom chips, from what I can see. And I believe this Western Digital chip here is for the floppy drive controller, which is on board. And the hard drive controller is on an expansion card, which is also Western Digital. And then down here, we've got the RAM. And by default, the Apricot PCs have 256 kilobytes of RAM by default, which of course could be upgraded with an expansion card. And here we've got a very awesome picture, just looks beautiful, of the Apricot PC, and I just love the way this looks. I mean, you know, the advertising department was just on point with these pictures. Like, they just look amazing. And here we've got some more awesome stuff. And this is an example of some of the software by ACT. It comes in these cool boxes here. I don't have any physical software, original physical software, that is. And also, we've got ACT branded micro floppy disks. And as you can see, it says CPM and MS-DOS, which is nice. It also mentions the programming languages, and Pascal is mentioned. And I've also noticed that about 80%, or maybe even more, of the software for the Apricot, made by Apricot that is, was done in Pascal. So I guess the developers liked Pascal. And this is a picture of the manufacturing plant in Scotland. So a lot of the Apricot stuff was made in Scotland, up in Scotland. And yeah, this is what it looks like in 1984 or 1983. Also, you might notice down here we've got a Sirius 1, which is the predecessor to the Apricot PC, which came out in 1982. Also, I've noticed there is an Apricot Xi here, so maybe this brochure is from 1984, unless this is a very early picture of the soon-to-come Apricot Xi. The reason I say it could be from 1983 is because, you know, we've got all these pictures of the Apricot PC, not the Xi. We also have a printer here, which looks like it has an ACT badge on it, so I guess they also made printers too, which I didn't know. And we've also got some cool stuff here. I think this is just talking about, well, it talks about more of the hardware specs, but also that you can connect. There was an Apricot 0.7 system, which I believe looked the same, but it had a little 0.7 badge on it, and you could connect up to 7 Apricots at once in a network. And I think this is the network card here. I'm not sure, because I've never seen this before, but I think it must be the network card. And also it says here display screens 9-inch and 12-inch. So yeah, I always thought it was 11-inch, but yeah, it is 12-inch. And yeah, that's it for the brochure, but very cool. I like this brochure. Okay, so this is the furthest I can zoom out, but we're just gonna open this up and I'll show you the inside. Okay, so to take the top off, we need to pull the back out a little bit. We can't pull it out completely because it's still attached. The power connector's attached to the power supply inside. But that allows us to take the top off, and there we go. This is the inside of the Apricot Xi. So it's actually quite neatly laid out. We've got the the fan here. It's a beefy metal fan. We've got the power supply, which sits there. The MFM 10 megabyte hard disk, which is here. We've got a nice 16 ohm, half watt, decent sized speaker right there. This is where the floppy drive would sit. And we've got the Western Digital hard drive controller card, which obviously connects to the hard drive here. And all these components sort of sit on this metal sort of chassis bracket. And then obviously underneath you've got the motherboard, which I've already shown you in the brochure. Another thing to mention with this particular one is that it may look a little strange over here if anyone's used to seeing inside of one of these. The reason for that is that this has a AT power supply, a modern AT power supply, swapped out into the original sort of power supply housing. Now, this wasn't done by me, this was done by the previous owner, but it seems to work well, so I'm going to leave it as it is. But I believe the reason for this beefy speaker is actually because we have a SN76489 Texas Instruments sound chip in here, which I believe was used by, was it Master System, the Sega SG-1000, Game Gear, I think the Tandy 1000, and also the BBC Micro. So it's got an alright sound chip, at least it's not PC speaker only. Now, of course, this being mainly a business PC, it doesn't really utilize it that much, but if you want to make games for this, that could be quite useful. Okay, so let's take a look inside the monitor. So I'm just gonna get my screwdriver and we'll take a look inside. So there is a service manual for this monitor, which if you search for the Apricot PC service manual, it actually comes with a service manual for the floppy drives, the Sony floppy drives, and also the Panasonic monitor. This is I believe a Panasonic monitor, if my memory serves me right. So we'll take those screws out, and I believe we'll take the contrast knob off, and I think it just slides off. Actually, no, I'm wrong. There is 2 more screws hiding up here. Okay, I've got those screws out, so I'll just take the back off. And there we go. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a big sort of shielding here. And we can see the back of the neck board there. This is for the contrast, it's contrast control. I think the 12 volts from the PC actually goes straight to this control here. I think that's how that works. But anyway, I'm going to take the shielding off, we'll take a look inside. I'm also going to put a bit of contact cleaner on the neck because I was getting a bit of a jittery picture. And I found in the past, especially with these older ones, which are dirty, is that if I clean the neck, the pins on the tube and the neck socket, it usually helps with jitter, so I'm going to give that a go. Okay, so I've removed the screws, so I'll just take that off. And as you can see, we've got cable going to this pot here, which of course is live, neutral, and ground, which, let's see, I think it does come from the 12 volts. I'm trying to see. It's hard to see, but it does go to this edge connector. So there's an edge connector down here. So that's where everything goes in. So it's quite easy to take that off. And this board is quite small. It's been a while since I've opened this, but it's a very small board. And of course, we've got the fly back there. Nice, cute little tube. And in fact, I've just noticed it's a Zenith tube, I believe. I could have sworn this was Panasonic. Maybe a different one I've got is Panasonic, but I think that, yeah, that does say Zenith. There is a Zenith badge here. So that's interesting. We've also got a date code. Yeah, so we've got that Zenith badge there. We've also got a date code of 1984. December the 6th of 1984. Yeah, it's not too dirty inside, but yeah, that board is very small. It's very cute and small, quite like it. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to clean the neck, see if that helps a little bit. Okay, so I'll just take the neck board off. Okay, so there we go, that's the neck board off. It was quite a snug fit. It's probably not been off here in decades. So anyway, I'm going to spray some contact cleaner and clean up the pins. Okay, so just going to put a cloth down here so I don't spill it all. So just spray some on there, and I'm going to be gentle and just, with this brush, just brush the pins a little bit. Okay, and I'm also going to spray some in the socket. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry a little bit and then I'll put the neck board back on. Okay, so while I've been waiting for that to dry, I was just thinking maybe the 9-inch version of the monitor is a Panasonic and not the 12-inch, because this is Zenith. So yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, so I also decided to spray the pot, and I've just given it a few turns as well, because it probably needs it. Okay, so I've got some other Apricot Xi stuff. So I've got a keyboard here, which unfortunately has had some sort of damage to the top of the micro screen. Now this one, I did try and test, and it seems to be flaky. Some of the buttons here light up instead of all of them, and yeah, a lot of the keys don't work. So it could have extra issues, but one thing I forgot to mention about these keyboards is that they are keytronic. So they have foam and foil pads, and the foam likes to deteriorate over time, and then it means the keys don't work. My other keyboard, which I showed you, does work, and I replaced all the keys. So I'll probably have to replace the keys on this one too, but unfortunately, I managed to get most of the screws out, but one of the screws was too rusted to come out. It just would not budge. So I'm going to have to drill one of the screws out, I think. Okay, I've also got another couple of base units here. So yeah, these base units are untested. I haven't had a chance to test them, but they both have power supplies, and they both have expansion cards in there. And also, unfortunately, well, they did have floppy drives, which I've removed, but unfortunately they have cracks in the plastic, which is a shame. So both of them have cosmetic issues, but they both have motherboards and all the other parts. So these are useful spares. Okay, and I've got another couple of monitors. This one is the 9-inch monitor, which I was talking about. So this is, I think this one's the most common monitor. I could be wrong, but this one's much smaller. It's very cute, small. And this one does work. The downside to the 9-inch monitor is that it has this sort of black fabric mesh on the front, which I think is to help with contrast. And because of that, it gets dirty and it's a real pain to clean. So I need to take this off, but I will do that eventually. And then I've got this other monitor, which is another 12-inch monitor. Now this one sort of works. The other two definitely work. This one, the tube and the flyback, I'm pretty sure work because I get a raster, I get an image. But it's scrolling, the image is scrolling horizontally really fast. So I don't know if there's a component in there or some sort of, I don't know, horizontal lock. I don't know. That's not working, but everything else seems to be working on it. So it is promising at least. And if not, it'll be useful spare parts. But on the back, this one, you may have noticed, if I can angle it well, we've got the Apricot logo. This is the more modern Apricot logo. So instead of ACT, it has the Apricot logo. So this is when they changed the name, company name, from ACT to Apricot. Okay, and I've also got this box of spare parts and documentation. So I'll go through these on the bench camera, but I did get these with the very first Apricot Xi I showed you, which is the fully working one. I got that off eBay, and it came with this nice box full of lots of spare parts, which is pretty cool. So we also have these here, which are hardware and software sort of catalogs, and there's quite a bit in here. Lots of software, like tons of software, all probably UK made. Now the problem is, software for the Apricot, it's very hard to find it physical. Like, very hard to find it physical, and finding any software, you're relying on the software that's been uploaded to the internet. But I think someone found a large amount of Apricot floppy disks, and they archived them, which is very nice. But that's basically all the Apricot software we have available. So a lot of this software is probably missing, and we won't be able to see it again, most likely. And also, I do have these Apricot user magazines, which I believe was only released in the UK. I don't think it would have been released in America. I doubt it anyway. But as you can see, the first issue was February 1985, and I will probably do a separate video looking through these magazines, or maybe a live stream. Maybe that would be a pretty cool live stream to look through these. So we'll talk about the magazines and look through them in a separate video, but I did want to show you guys this page, which is a page on games for the Apricot. So games for the Apricot aren't common, and there's not very many of them. I don't even know if there's many physical games like that are actually released with their own box art and manual. I believe some of these were, because we do have some info down here of prices by some companies here, so Kuma Computers. So maybe there were physical games with their own boxes, but I've never seen them whatsoever. And of course, games for the Apricot weren't really common because it's more of a business machine than a home computer. Of course, people could buy them for the home, but they were mainly business machines, and Apricot computers sort of became business machines up until the mid-90s with the Mitsubishi Apricots, and they were sort of became home computers again. But it does mention a game here called Adventure, which is a text-based adventure, and I have found that online, so I'll show you that later. And there's also one called Maze Runner by the same company, by Kuma Computers. And Maze Runner is pretty cool. It's sort of like Pac-Man, so I'll show you that as well. Okay, so in that box of spare parts, we have a couple of motherboards. So this is the first motherboard, and I believe this is an Apricot Xi motherboard. The reason I say that is because I think the Apricot PC had only 2 expansion slots rather than 3. And I think the reason for that is because the Apricot Xi, of course, uses the Western Digital hard drive controller, which takes up a slot, so they provided another slot. Yeah, it says Apricot motherboard up here, 256 kilobytes of RAM, which was standard anyway. I don't believe you could get any more on the base motherboard without any expansion cards. But of course, we've seen this in the brochure, and this one needs a bit of a clean, but I'm unsure if this works. I haven't tested these yet, but we'll do that in a separate video where I go through all this untested stuff, and we'll go through, test it, and maybe repair it if it needs it. And then on the back here, you may notice there's no bodge wires. So I'll show you the next motherboard in a minute, but yeah, there's no bodge wires here. We've also got this, which if I zoom in, there we go. Yeah, I believe that might be a date code, 8515, possibly. I know they were still making the XIs in 85, so it's possible. Okay, and this is the other motherboard. As I said, I think this is an Apricot PC motherboard. I don't have a Apricot PC. I've only got XIs, but I think this is one because, as you can see, we've only got 2 expansion ports there. And this says also Revision D up here. And yeah, we've got the Intel 8089, the 86. We don't have any coprocessor or anything. So yeah, this also is a little dusty and untested. And then on the back, as you can see, we got some bodge wires now. I believe these are factory bodge wires, so I'm assuming the Apricot PC had a couple of bodge wires, and in the Xi they sort of redesigned it a little bit, possibly. And then here we've also got that green sticker, which is upside down. We've got that green sticker which says 8423, so I believe it is a date code. And that would also imply that they were still making the original Apricot PC in '84, even though the Xi was released. Okay, so the other spare bits I have, we have a original Apricot PC power supply, which is an Aztec, and this one has a date of '84. Probably hard to see that. And yeah, this is an original one. It hasn't had much work. The only thing I've done, if I can take the case off, yeah, there we go. So the only thing I've done with this is change the reefer capacitors. So if you do have one of these Apricot PCs or Xis, keep in mind there are 3 reefer capacitors. There's 2 here, which I've replaced, and also this one, which I replaced. So you'll definitely need to replace those. I've also heard that one of these caps here can go bad. I believe these are 10 volt. Let me see. No, sorry, not 10 volt, 16 volt, of course. 16 volt, 1000 microfarad capacitors. So I think one of those can go leaky and go bad, so that's also something to keep an eye on. But I've heard these power supplies are fairly reliable, so yes, I've not had much experience with these power supplies because, again, the one in my Apricot Xi, the working one, is not an original power supply. Okay, so we've also got a Rodime hard disk. So this is the MFM hard disk, which was used in the Apricot PC, the Apricot Xi. As you can see, it says assembled in Scotland. I think a lot of British computer parts were manufactured in Scotland in the 80s. And again, this is one that I've sort of had no problems with. These Rodime hard disks, in my opinion, I haven't had many problems with them. They've been fairly reliable. And some people say otherwise. They say they're not reliable, but I've had pretty good luck with them. So I'm not sure, really. Maybe I'm just lucky. And of course, you can see the edge connectors here, which go to ribbon cables, and we've got a Molex power connector. Of course, this is an MFM hard drive, so it operates more like a floppy disk drive, but obviously bigger capacity and faster read and rates. We have a copyright of 1984, and I believe there's a date code here, which it's really hard to see, but it does say 84 there. Okay, we got more spare bits here. I believe these are all expansion cards. I think 2 of them are memory expansions. Yeah, this one says Citi or CITI Software Ltd memory expansion. And then it says 512K there. So yeah, 512K of memory. This next one here is another memory expansion. It says Apricot memory expansion, 1985. This one looks a bit different, so I'm unsure whether this one's for a different Apricot, maybe an Apricot Zen, because I haven't got this one to work. Now, there's obviously a couple of reasons. It could be faulty, or it could be something to do with the dip switch settings, but I haven't got it to work, and it does look a bit different to the other ones. I think this could be an Apricot Zen. And the last one we've got is not a memory expansion, but it's not anything too interesting. It's just a Western Digital hard drive controller, which the Xi uses. It uses, well, all the Xis use the same one. And I haven't tested this one, but it probably does work. They're quite reliable. Okay, we've also got a couple of floppy drives here. So these are the original floppy drives from my Apricot Xis. One of them had a missing floppy drive, and the other 2 had these drives in. Now, you can see One of them says double-sided, one says single-sided, and they are both Sony floppy drives. So the double-sided one is a Sony 0AD32W10, and the single-sided is a Sony 0AD31V14. And yeah, these are very early 3.5-inch floppy drives. I believe the Macintosh 1984 Macintosh used very similar drives to these. I think the Macintosh had like an auto eject mechanism, which this doesn't. It's all manual with this button here. But I think they're very similar. Now, unfortunately, and this seems to be a very common problem with these drives in the Apricots, is that the motor dies. So the spindle motor, which you can sort of see in there, it basically just dies and stops working. I have tested it. It isn't seized up. It just doesn't work. And someone else online had the same issue. And to fix it, they had to get a donor motor assembly and switch it in there. So unfortunately, I can't get these working. I probably won't be able to unless I find a replacement drive. So unfortunately, I have to use Gotex at the moment. And the last thing in that box of goodies is a bunch of books. So we're not really going to go through these because it's going to take forever, but I'll just skim through them. So we've got Apricot Applications pack, and the best thing about this really is the front cover. I think it looks awesome. We've got the Apricot F1 there, which I don't own, but we do have the Xi and the PC, and also an Apricot Portable, which I do own. So we've also got the Apricot Software Microsoft pack, which is just, I believe, just MS-DOS and GW Basic is all this has. We've got the configurator guide. We've also got the MS-DOS guide. We've got MS-DOS quick reference card, setting up instructions for the Xi, recommended supplies. This one's actually interesting. So we've got this cool dude here with his his ACT binder and his Apricot on the desk. And what's cool about it is that it shows some awesome stuff you could buy. So we've got these awesome Apricot branded bags and keyboard covers, and I've never seen these before, but these look awesome. We've also got prices for all the monitors, which is nice, and chairs as well. You could buy a chair for £105 without arms or £160 with arms, and you could get them in red or blue. And we've also got workstation desks and printer stands. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. Moving on, we've got the owner's handbook. There is a couple of things I want to look at. So in the owner's handbook, it does show, if I can find it. Well, first of all, it shows this. This is the manager, the Apricot manager. So for the PC, this is the sort of interface it has with MS-DOS to make things a bit easier. And they changed that in the Xi. It also shows how you can attach the keyboard to the base of the unit to make it more portable. And we've also got this here, which shows you how you can place the monitor. You've got that indentation on the top of the base unit. And it basically just allows you to put the monitor in all sorts of different angles. I thought that was a neat idea. We've got an Apricot Portable starter pack and some other documentation for the portable. We've also got this Apricot Software Btran. Now this is basically software to convert BBC Basic programs to GW Basic for the Apricot. I've got some more manuals here, nothing too interesting. F1 starter pack and some more manuals for software. Okay, so I think we're ready to power it on now, so I'll hit the switch. Okay, maybe you can hear that nice old MFM hard drive booting up. And as you can see, we've got the Apricot logo here. We've got system OK, 256K of RAM. And at this point, it does try and boot from the floppy if there is one. So I'll bring you guys in closer a bit. Yep, we've got the BIOS here, 1985, 10 megabyte Winchester disk storage, which is the hard drive. 720K floppy disk drive, which I don't have in here, but the system thinks there is one. And here we boot into Activity. So this is the Apricot Activity. This is the successor to the manager, I believe, in the Apricot PC. I showed you in the manual. But yeah, this is basically a sort of front end to MS-DOS. It's just running on top of it, and you can see some programs to run here and shortcuts to other programs. And here we've got the hard drive, which is the A drive letter, and B drive letter is the floppy drive, which is quite similar to the PC98. It does a similar thing. And also on the keyboard, you can see it says Apricot Activity, and we've got these same, we've got the buttons here for these same options here: activity files, utility disk, help, and exit. So we can press, for example, utility here, and it'll boot into utility. And hopefully the light isn't in the way too much. But what's pretty cool about the Apricot is that it has an icon editor and a font editor built in to this activity manager. And I believe the icon editor is to sort of edit these icons, and the font editor is, of course, to edit the ASCII font. Now, this can be quite useful if you want your own font, but also useful if you want to make your own games. So it's useful if you want to make your own games and you want to use ASCII graphics. You can actually just draw your own ASCII graphics in this utility. And in fact, I've already done that. If we go to, let's see, the asterisk. Well, it was once the asterisk. It's not anymore. Is it this one? There we go. I drew a very primitive stickman. It's not very good, but you can also see him right there in the font. So if you want to make your own games, you can sort of cheat a little bit and use this utility. Now you may notice I'm using the keyboard to navigate. I did try and use a serial mouse with an adapter, but unfortunately it isn't working, and I'm not sure why. There has been a couple of other people on the internet who have got it to work, but I can't get it to work, so I'll have to figure that one out. But anyway, let's exit out of here, and that will take us to the DOS prompt. Now you may notice we have a little message here that says GSX not installed. That's because most of those icons and graphics were actually using something called GSX, which I believe is like a graphics driver. And it was made by Digital Research, I believe, same guys who made CPM. And the Apricot basically uses that for most things. In fact, I believe GW Basic requires you to have GSX running. But I haven't tried using it myself yet. But anyway, we're at the DOS prompt here. So luckily the hard drive's still working. So even though I don't have a floppy drive, I can still store many files on here. And while we're here, I might as well show you, let's see. Let's show you MRunner. This is a game I mentioned in the Apricot magazine. So we'll go to MRunner and we'll run it. Now it'll take a second to boot up, but this is sort of like a Pac-Man clone in a way. But this game uses ASCII graphics. But yeah, this game uses ASCII graphics. As you can see, there's little characters here, which were most likely done using the utility I showed you. So anyway, let's start it. So it's asking the amount of players. We'll say 1. And to control it, it uses Z, X, and K and M to move. So no WASD in this game. But that's me there. So I just go around the maze. I could pick up a sword. If I pick up a sword, it means I can fight. Yeah, there we go. I can fight the enemies. But I think the more you use the sword, it degrades and eventually breaks. And then when you touch an enemy, you just die. So there we go. Okay, that was a close one. And the idea is just to collect all these treasure chests here. So let's see if I can complete this level. And yeah, there isn't really any soundtrack to the game. But with the Texas Instruments sound chip, you could probably make a soundtrack. So anyway, I just died there, unfortunately. But it's a pretty nifty game, and it uses ASCII graphics, which is nice. Let me adjust the contrast control, because I think it might be a bit high. Maybe a little bit. But either way, this monitor looks very crisp in person. Nice and high res. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the stuff I wanted to show you guys on the hard drive, so I'm going to have to connect the Gotek drive. And then I can show you the IBM PC emulator and also the music program that someone made to make your own music on this. Okay, so I've just connected my Gotek up to the Apricot. And as you can see, this is the original floppy data cable. And it's a 26-pin cable, so you need an adapter like this one, which I think was on a GitHub somewhere. And then you can convert it to a regular floppy drive. I've got it connected with the Gotek now, so I'm going to switch it on. Okay. So first of all, we'll try the text-based adventure called Adventure. Okay, so we'll try the text-based adventure called Adventure. Well, at least the magazine says it's called Adventure, but I believe... let's see. Oh yeah, AD. I believe it does have a different name. We'll find out. I think it's Adventure of something. So yeah, it says, please wait while the text and data files are loaded and decoded. And of course, this is a text-based adventure, so I don't think it uses any custom text font. At least I don't think so. Okay, so there we go. It says the island of Artuan Adventure. So maybe that's the proper name for it. But it also has a copyright date of 1982. So I don't know whether this was meant for the Sirius 1 or the Victor 9000, the original sort of Apricot PCs. So anyway, that is the text-based adventure. I'm sorry about the light glaring on the screen there. Okay, so I've turned the light off. You can see a bit better now. So yeah, this is the text-based adventure. Very similar to Zork. So we can type in help. So yeah, this is very similar to Zork. As you can see, we've got commands here for doing stuff. It's similar to Zork. I am curious if this is exclusive to the Apricot, or maybe this has a port for the IBM PC. I don't know. Okay, so we'll try the music program next. So we'll exit out of activity. And I haven't figured out how to use this program properly. It's having a trouble. Oh yeah, that's the wrong disk. There we go. It should work now. So I haven't figured out how to use it properly, but I believe if we type in play, we type in play, it brings up a keyboard, and we can type in one of the tunes that is on the floppy disk. So I'll type in Laura. I don't know why it's Laura. There seems to be different names for different people. I don't know whether this was a, commercial release or just someone messing about, making their own program. Okay, so we'll try Laura. I'm gonna hold the microphone close to the speaker. It is quite loud anyway, but just so you can hear this. Okay, and that is the tune called Laura. So yeah, that is pretty much it for the music software. Again, I don't know if it was commercially released or not, but you can also make your own tunes, although it's very primitive on how you do it. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you guys is the emulator, the IBM PC emulator. So if I go into, let's see, VA160. Okay, so EM IBM is the emulator. Okay, and there we go. Apricot IBM emulator, 9th of September 86. I don't know when the last release of this was. This could be the last version. So I'm going to switch the floppy disk to, let's see. I think this floppy disk has Zork on it. Yeah, there we go. So I'm not sure if I've got a bad version of Zork, but this does not work properly. I've actually had this issue on another machine which is supposedly IBM compatible. It's called an NEC multi-speed portable computer. But it also has a similar issue to this machine, so I'll show you. Okay, I didn't put the one in. So I'll let it boot up, but it has some graphical issues. There we go. So supposedly this emulator will only do text mode, so I thought Zork would be a good option. But as you can see, it does spew out some garbage before and sometimes after things. But all the text for the game is there, it is present. It's just got garbage before it. And of course, moves and score and west of house is not at the top of the screen, it's at the bottom instead. But yeah, every time you do something, it just prints out garbage as well. So I'm not sure if that's an issue with the Zork or maybe an issue with the emulator. But yeah, it doesn't seem to work that well. Also, just to show you quickly, in the IBM emulator, we actually have, as you can see, F9, F10, and numlock there, represented on the micro screen. And yeah, that is pretty much it for the Apricot Xi. I've just shown you what I've got. Eventually, I'll do videos on testing the other motherboards, see if they're working, and also on the other Apricot stuff I've got. But yeah, that's it for this video. So hope you guys enjoyed, and take care.